You break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is.
Right, it's totally binary.
Exactly. Clean. Broken or not broken. But as the stack of sources you provided us today proves, the moment you step into the world of human performance and leadership,
That X-ray machine just shatters.
it really does. We are looking at a landscape that is just incredibly murky. So today, we are cutting through the corporate fluff to find out why the way we hire, the way we promote, and really the way we evaluate people is fundamentally broken.
It's the definition of diagnostic muddy waters. Most organizations are just operating with completely broken instruments when they try to figure out what makes people actually good at their job.
Yeah, and the stakes are massive here.
Oh, absolutely, because the text you brought us suggests that most companies are trapped in this vicious cycle. They hire for skill, but ultimately they fire for character.
And to figure out how to break that cycle, you handed us a truly eclectic mix of sources today. So let's start right at the starting line, which for most organizations is the resume.
The dreaded resume.
Right. We have all seen them. The heavily formatted documents with bulleted lists of software proficiencies, certifications, past titles. We treat these documents as X-rays of a person's ability.
We really do.
But the manuscript throws a massive wrench into this right away by stating unequivocally that skill is not competence.
It's a jarring paradigm shift for anyone who has ever, screened a pile of applications.
Right.
We are deeply conditioned to look at a list of skills and just equate that to a person's capacity to actually do the job.
Right.
To break this down, the source uses a beautifully simple analogy, kicking a soccer ball.
Okay, a little late on me.
At its most basic functional level, if you're evaluating a player, the first question is, can this person physically kick the ball?
Yep.
If the answer is no, the conversation ends. It really doesn't matter how passionate they are about the sport.
So skill is essentially just the key card to the building.
Yes.
It gets you through the front door, but it tells you absolutely nothing about how you behave once you're inside.
Precisely the point the text makes. Just because you can kick the ball, that merely gets you on the field. It absolutely does not mean you can play the complex, fast-paced game of soccer.
Wait, but hold on. I can see a hiring manager listening to this and heavily pushing back.
Oh, for sure.
Like, if I am hiring, say, a senior software developer, and they can write flawless code, they pass every single technical assessment I throw at them in the interview process. Why isn't that enough?
Because that is the trap.
Isn't competence in the corporate world just being really, really good at the specific technical skill you are hired to execute?
Knowing how to write code, run a financial report, or close a sales deal, that is a functional threshold. It's the kicking of the ball. The source defines true competence as something far more dynamic.
Capacity in motion.
Right. Yes, capacity in motion. Competence is situational, it's highly contextual, and it is deeply human. It's knowing the what, the how, and the why, and then executing it consistently under pressure while interacting with other human beings.
It's the with other human beings part that totally blows up the traditional hiring model. The text gives that great example of the highly skilled presenter.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
You have someone who can completely dazzle a boardroom. They have the mechanics of public speaking locked down. They know how to project, how to use slides, how to pace their speech.
The raw skills.
Exactly. But if that same person sits down in a one-on-one setting and cannot listen to a colleague, if they can't ask meaningful questions or tailor their message with actual empathy for the person across the table, they are highly skilled but entirely incompetent as a leader.
And this ties directly back to your tone guide source, which demands authority with empathy.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The authority part is often just the skill, the raw knowledge. The empathy is the context. Empathy is what turns that skill into actual competence. We constantly confuse potential with competence.
Meaning potential is just what could happen in a vacuum.
Exactly. Competence is what actually gets delivered when the real world gets messy.
So if a checklist of skills isn't enough to guarantee performance, we need a better diagnostic tool. We need a way to measure the whole person, not just the bullet points on their resume.
Which leads us directly to the core formula the manuscript introduces to solve this exact problem.
The competence equation.
Right. This equation is where the text moves from philosophy to a highly practical, albeit kind of ruthless, framework.
Okay, let's hear it.
The formula is this. Competence equals capability multiplied by character multiplied by intent.
Capability times character times intent. And the mathematics here are the entire point, right? This is multiplication, not addition.
It is the most critical distinction in the entire manuscript. Think about how we usually evaluate people. We add things up.
Like a pros and cons list.
Yeah, we say, well, their character isn't great, they're a bit abrasive, but they bring in so much revenue, so it balances out.
Right.
If this formula were addition capability plus character plus intent, you could have a massive score in capability, a literal 0 in character, and you would still walk away with a positive number at the end. You'd still have a supposedly competent employee.
But because it's multiplication, if any single one of those factors drops to 0,
The entire equation zeroes out.
wow, you cannot compensate for toxic behavior just by being a wizard at financial modeling.
Yeah.
If your character is a 0, your overall competence is a 0.
And the text issues a very specific warning about the dark side of intent.
The dark side.
Yeah, imagine a highly capable, extremely clever employee. Their engine is huge, but they actively cut corners to hit their targets, or they quietly undermine their teammates to gain personal status.
Ugh, we've all worked with that person.
Right. Their capability is high, but their intent is entirely misaligned with the organization's goals. Competence without aligned intent is not just ineffective. The source explicitly calls it dangerous.
Because it scales. That's a multiplier effect.
That is a great connection.
When you have a leader with high capability but toxic intent, that toxicity scales. They turn one self-serving decision into 47 toxic interactions across the company.
Yes.
It's exactly like building a high-performance car.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Capability is your engine. It's the raw horsepower, the knowledge, the skill. Character is your steering and suspension. It dictates how you handle the bumps, absorb the shocks of the road, and keep the car from spinning out.
And intent.
Intent is the GPS. If your GPS is programmed to drive you right off a cliff, it really doesn't matter how incredible that engine is, you are going to crash the car.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text describes aligned intent as the quiet engine of competence. It answers the fundamental question: why are you doing this?
Right.
When a person's intent is truly aligned with the team's mission, they operate with a deep, proactive sense of ownership.
Like the examples in the book.
Exactly. The manuscript gives the example of a nurse who stays past their shift simply to comfort a patient's family, or a software engineer who digs into the system and fixes an unassigned bug that was annoying a completely different department.
They aren't doing those things to pad their resume.
No, they're doing them because their intent is locked onto the purpose of the work.
Okay, so we have the high-level formula. Competence equals capability times character times intent. But the manuscript actually opens up the hood on each of these 3 variables to see what they are made of.
And to do this, it pulls in a classic framework developed by the U.S. Army in the 1980s and 90s, the Be-No-Do framework.
The Army. That's interesting.
Yeah, the Army realized very early on that they couldn't just train leaders to mindlessly follow orders. They needed leaders who could adapt, think critically, and act ethically in totally unpredictable, high-stress environments.
Makes sense.
So they broke leadership down. Know and do map perfectly to the capability part of our equation. Be maps to character.
Let's unpack the math on capability first. The text says capability isn't just one thing. It equals knowledge plus skill plus aptitude.
Right.
Knowledge is the theory, the what and why. Skill is the earned execution. But aptitude is the fascinating variable here.
It really is. Aptitude is your raw wiring. It's your natural predisposition. It dictates how quickly your brain processes a certain type of information or how easily you pick up a physical motion.
Like naturally having good hand-eye coordination.
Exactly. But the text makes a crucial caveat that we often forget. Aptitude only shapes the initial path. It does not dictate the final destination.
So having high aptitude just means you get a head start in the race.
That's it. And the tension here is that someone with lower natural aptitude, who engages in deliberate, grueling practice building their knowledge and skill, can absolutely outperform someone who relies entirely on their raw natural talent, but never puts in the work.
Capability requires all 3 interacting.
Yes.
Now let's look at character, which is the Be in the Army framework. The text expands character into attitude plus behavior plus values. And here is where it gets incredibly dense.
Because it references Kurt Lewin's equation, right?
Yeah, just explain the psychology behind how we act.
Kurt Lewin was a pioneer in social psychology, and his equation is foundational. Behavior is a function of the person and their environment. B equals F of P, comma, E.
And what does that actually mean in plain English?
What Luhmann meant is that you cannot evaluate a person's actions in a vacuum. You have to look at how their internal makeup reacts to the specific external pressures of the room they are standing in.
This requires a really sharp distinction between personality and character, which the text spends a lot of time on.
It does.
Personality is described as your automatic, unconscious behavior on a bad day. It's the neural pathways you default to when you are tired, stressed, or threatened.
If someone critiques your work and your immediate visceral reaction is to get defensive and snap back, that is a personality default. Character, however, is entirely different.
Character is a reflection of your agency.
Yes, it is your self-control. It's your conscious values stepping in to override those automatic impulses.
So imagine two managers might have the exact same technical skills. The project fails. Under the pressure of a boardroom review, Manager A's personality takes over and they immediately blame their team.
A classic defensive reaction.
Right. Manager B feels that same internal urge to deflect, but their character overrides it, and they calmly take responsibility for the failure. Only one of them is displaying the character required for true competence.
And then we have the final variable, intent. The text links this directly to motivation. Are you driven by status? By power? By a need for achievement or affiliation?
Understanding what actually motivates a person is the only way to understand their intent.
Exactly.
All right, I have to stop us here because we are building this perfect psychological model, but let's ground this in reality for the listener.
Okay, let's do it.
The text literally says, character is what you do when no one is watching. But if I am a hiring manager sitting in a 45-minute job interview, everyone is watching.
That is the big dilemma.
The candidate knows they are being evaluated. They're giving me a highly rehearsed, sanitized version of themselves. How am I supposed to assess their deep-seated values or their agency from across a conference table?
The manuscript acknowledges this as precisely. The gap between our self-perception and our actual behavior is usually a chasm. To assess character, the text says you have to move beyond the interview and look at the behavioral trail a person leaves behind.
The behavioral trail.
Yes. You look for observable actions over a long timeline. When you ask them about a past failure, do they use I when talking about the mistake and we when talking about the success?
Well, that's a huge tell.
Huge. How do they communicate with administrative staff? Do they listen to comprehend or just listen to respond? You are looking for patterns of agency overriding personality.
Okay, so let's say you've done the impossible. You've vetted the behavioral trail. You've found someone with high capability, stellar character, and perfectly aligned intent.
The unicorn.
Exactly. You have hired the mathematically perfect, competent leader, but then you drop them into a company where the culture is notoriously toxic or the bureaucracy is suffocating. What happens to all that competence?
This is where the manuscript brings in a final framework to add a layer of brutal reality, the COMB model. COMB stands for capability, opportunity, motivation, and behavior.
And as the text points out, this maps incredibly well to the competency equation we've been using.
It really does.
Capability maps to capability. Motivation maps to intent and character. But there is one glaring divergence that changes everything.
Yes, opportunity. In the COMB model, opportunity is entirely external. It is the environment.
The environment.
It is the reporting structures, the physical workspace, the access to resources, and the unwritten corporate culture.
So the competency equation assumes that the opportunity to act is already present. It just asks if the person has the right makeup to succeed.
But the COMB reminds us that if the environment restricts behavior, competence cannot emerge no matter how great the person is.
If you are listening to this on your commute or at your desk right now, think about your own workplace. You could hire that brilliant engineering manager, someone who embodies the authority with empathy from our tone guide perfectly.
A perfect hire on paper.
But if you drop them into a culture where they have to get 3 vice presidents' signatures just to approve a minor safety update, they will fail.
Without its doubt.
And it is not their fault. It is a failure of organizational design. It's like taking a prize-winning, genetically perfect seed and planting it in toxic soil. You can water it all you want, but nothing is going to grow.
And this pivots the entire discussion. It raises a very uncomfortable question for senior leaders.
Oh, I bet it does.
When you are looking at your team and frustrated by a lack of performance, are you only evaluating the individuals? Or are you evaluating the environment you have built for them?
That's a tough mirror to look into.
The text is uncompromising on this point. If you have a dysfunctional culture, your most competent people are actually the most likely to fail or leave because they cannot execute.
It changes the question from why isn't my team performing to what structural barriers have I put in their way that are capping their competence?
The manuscript quotes Ralph Nader here, noting that the true function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not more followers.
That's powerful.
You cannot produce leaders if you do not provide the right climate. True leadership isn't just about managing people, it's about architecting an environment where capability, character, and intent have the opportunity to thrive.
This entire deep dive has been a massive paradigm shift. But really, the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, is a fundamental redesign of how you view talent and performance.
It is about throwing away the checklist. Skill is just the price of entry. True performance is the multiplication of capability, character, and intent interacting within the right environment. Whether you are hiring a new team member, evaluating a manager, or just trying to chart your own career path, you have to look at the whole equation.
But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. It's a specific, almost philosophical nuance buried deep in the text that really stuck with me. The manuscript introduces a concept called the dizziness of freedom.
That is such a powerful phrase, originally rooted in existential philosophy, actually, but applied here to corporate advancement.
Yeah, it happens when someone gets promoted. Suddenly, the possibilities, the scope, and the sheer autonomy of their new role completely exceed their previous experience.
The guardrails come off.
Exactly. As you advance in your own career, you gain more freedom, you gain more power. You have far less direct supervision telling you what to do every hour.
Which sounds great until you actually have to navigate it.
So I want you to reflect deeply on this as you go about your week. As your skills propel you upward, is your character growing fast enough to handle that dizzying lack of boundaries? Or are your impressive technical skills just masking a character gap that this new dizziness of freedom is about to violently expose?
Something we all need to be honest with ourselves about.
Think about that the next time you update your resume. Thanks for diving deep with us.